Let's go ahead and get started today. I think all of us can acknowledge that we as a nation are terrible at conflict. I mean, you look, it seems like every day there's a new YouTube video about somebody getting in a fight at a McDonald's restaurant over the wrong order being placed, or a fight on a sports team, and every day there are fights in politics, right? We have no idea how to do conflict well. We're pretty bad. One of my favorite examples of bad conflict was a story of a woman, and she told this on her wedding day. She got in a fight with her about-to-be husband. She wanted to do a very traditional kind of wedding, and so she had something borrowed and something blue, and the blue was a sapphire pendant necklace that her fiance had bought for her for the day. Something blue. The wedding day came, she couldn't find the necklace. So here's how the fight went. "How could you let me lose it?" she said to him. She said, "It was your job not to let my airheadedness get in the way." And she said, after I finished ranting and railing, he calmly pointed out that the necklace was hanging around my neck. Welcome to America, right? We fight about silly things. We fight about surface things. That's the big one. We fight about what's up here, and we never get down to what the real issues are. So consequently, we rarely solve problems in our conflict. Usually our conflict creates more problems, right? That's usually what happens. We don't solve our problems. We don't actually make a lot of progress. Relationships continue to be damaged, and in many cases just fall apart. And I'm not trying to pretend, please hear me as I get into this today. This is really important. I probably won't remember to say it again later, but you need to hear me say, I'm not saying that conflict resolution is easy. It's extremely complicated and hard to do well. I mean, think about all the things that we can be talking about. Some of you have to have a conversation where you're going to end a romantic relationship. Ever have to talk to an offensive coworker? How about asking a friend to repay a loan? That's a fun one. Some of you, it's not a friend, it's a relative. Critiquing a colleague's work, dealing with a rebellious team, discussing a serious issue with your spouse, asking your in-laws to stop interfering. Some of you have been putting that one off for a while. Confronting someone about an addiction, talking to someone about a hygiene issue. You smell really bad. Can we still be friends? So, I mean, man, and on we could go, right? With difficult conversations that have to be taking place that aren't. We're just avoiding them for obvious reasons. Because we know that we're about to start World War III if we try and bring some of these things up. So what we're talking about in this is, these are really what one author calls crucial conversations. A crucial conversation is defined by these three elements. There are opposing opinions, strong emotions, and the stakes are really high. You got to get this right. Here's the reality about your life to this point. You have been in many crucial conversations, and you will be in more. You have no say about that. That's just the reality of this world. So you only really have three options then. You can avoid them, which some of you are like, sign up for that one, please. I'm going to avoid all crucial conversations going forward. Or you can face them and handle them poorly, which we all have stories. We all have examples of times that we tried to have a conversation that was really difficult and we blew it. But there's a third option. You can learn how to face these crucial conversations and handle them well. The good news about what we're going to be talking about today is this is just a skill. It's a skill. That means you and I can get better at it. We can learn this skill, and if we do, then we'll have all these positive impacts. Not just our relationships will get better, but our lives will get better. Because one of the most stressful things you can live through is serious relational conflict with somebody that you really love, right? It can just drain the very life out of you. Your whole life gets better, not just the relationship itself. So we're in this series, we're just doing a series on relationships, and we're going to talk about this today. How can I improve my conflict resolution skills? So I want to ask you to grab your notes if you don't have them, you want to pick one up today. If you're watching on YouTube, you can download them now in the comment section. That's where we got them linked. You can open those up and follow along with us. And again, as we go through this, I've said this last time I spoke, if you hear anything really good today, just assume it came from this book, Crucial Conversations, one of the best books I've ever read on this subject, so I really encourage you to pick it up. Let's get started with this. So the first thing, if you want to have these crucial conversations and do them well, you got to get yourself ready to talk. Number one, get yourself ready to talk. Let's give give a classic American example of a crucial conversation handled poorly. In America, it's very common where you can get so caught up in your work that you are not spending much time with the person that you really love. And so let's say that your significant other is spending a lot of extra time at work, and it's not just for a season, but it just keeps going. And so you start to feel like a little bit neglected, and it's like, this isn't what I want. I want to spend more time with them. And so you try and bring it up a couple of times. It goes so bad that you're like, oh, I'm not going to try and bring that up again. And so you just kind of clam up. But now the problem hasn't gone away, has it? It's still there. You're still getting hurt, but now you're just not talking about it. And so now how does your pain come out? Typically, it comes out in little sarcastic remarks. Oh, you're working late again tonight? Geez, I have Facebook friends I see more often than I see you, because you're being hurt. Now, what does that little sarcastic comment do for them? Do they go, oh, now I want to spend more time with you. Thank you for saying that little snippy thing to me. Of course not. Now they're like, ow, that hurt. Now they're getting hurt, and they don't want to spend. Now they're like, I'm going to work even more time because I don't want to come and be with you if you're just going to nag me all the time. And so they work more, and now you're in what we call the death spiral. And this happens in conflict all the time. It's like, you get hurt, so you hurt them, so they hurt you back, and it goes nowhere positive at all. So avoiding the death spiral is something that is so important. And the only way you're going to do that is if you actually slow down and think about what you want to accomplish before you go into a conflict situation. So the way you do that, getting yourself ready to talk, first off, starts with clarifying your goals. What are your goals in this conflict situation? What are your goals? On the bottom of your notes, on the first page, I put these questions. They're up here if you want to just look at them here. So, what do I really want? For me, what do I want for me? What do I want for them? What do I want for the relationship? What would I do right now if I really wanted these results? Imagine if before you ever brought anything difficult up with someone else, you started with those questions. They would really change your focus in the conflict. What do I really want? Now, the Bible is so clear about this. In Proverbs chapter 15:28, it says, the heart of the godly thinks carefully before speaking. Would you underline those 4 words? Thinks carefully before. Maybe put a star by that one. Speaking. Not afterwards, before. And the reason why this is so important is because there are shadow goals that emerge in our life very easily. So you may have the goal, like that woman in the story I told, she wants to spend more time with this man that she loves. That's a good goal. But shadow goals emerge so easily, and we've all done these shadow goals. Here are the shadow goals. They're not on your notes. If you want to write them down, you can. The first shadow goal, is winning. So it's like, I want to win this argument. I want to win in this conflict situation. And winning in the book, they define it by you start correcting all their facts, you quibble over details, you point out all the flaws in their argument. You ever been in a situation where somebody was doing that to you? Ow. Doesn't feel very good. You don't feel listened to. You don't feel understood. I have done winning so wrong so many times. It's like, let's just move on from that one. The second one we do is punishing, where we are going to make them pay for hurting us. And sometimes you can slip into this one, where your goal is to really hurt them like they hurt you. Now, I've actually had people say that to me. I just want to hurt you like you've hurt me. That's not a nice thing. And then the third one is just keeping the peace. You choose personal safety over dialogue. And dialogue is the key word. If you weren't here and you missed when we were speaking about this last time, the whole thing is about having healthy dialogue. Here's what you're after in any conflict situation. You have your agenda, your thoughts, beliefs, and feelings. They have their thoughts, beliefs, and feelings. And what you're trying to do is get everybody to contribute equally into that middle area. The author calls it the pool of shared meaning. When you're able to dialogue in a healthy way about difficult things, you solve problems. So anything that stops dialogue is the enemy in a conflict situation. Dialogue is where things really, really positively happen and change in the relationship. You solve problems that way. So let me give you an example of this. There was a woman named Sarah who's the CEO of a mid-sized company. And things were not going as well as they should have, and so she really was pushing costs. We got to cut costs, and nobody was listening. Her managers were not paying attention to what she was saying, so she finally called a meeting. She had 200 of her mid-sized managers come to a meeting just with her leading it. She stood in front of them, laid out the case again. We've got to cut costs. And it was really on them, because they were going to have to get all their employees to do it. And so she laid out the case, why we have to do that. Then she said, any questions? Hand went up. This guy stood up, and he said, for 6 months you've been telling us to find ways to cut costs. He said, I'd be lying if I said we've given you much more than a lukewarm response. You've been asking us to use both sides of the paper and forgo all improvements while you are having a second office built. And all of a sudden, the conversation just went crucial. Can you imagine being in the room when that was said to the CEO in front of 200 managers? It means like all the air got sucked out of the room. Everyone's like, oh, he just said that to her. They're all thinking it, but nobody had said it. And then he went on, he said, the rumor is the furniture alone is going to cost $150,000. Is that right? And the CEO gripped the side of her podium. Her knuckles turned white. Her face just went taut. She brought her finger up like a gun, ready to unload. And then she brought it down. And then she let go of the podium. And she took a breath and she said, you know what? We need to talk about this. I'm glad you asked the question. Thank you for taking that risk. And then she started talking openly about it. She said, the second office was never my idea. The marketing people thought we needed to do it to look more impressive to all the investors. I didn't want to do this. But the other side of it is, she said, I haven't been paying attention at all to how the bills are running on this. And that's not very responsible at a time when I'm telling you all to manage your expenses and I'm not even watching what this is costing the company. She said, can somebody go out and get me the actual numbers on what this is costing? They went out, came back in, showed it to her, and she went, oh my goodness. I had no idea it was costing this much. That's on me, and I'm sorry for that. She said, what do we want to do going forward with this specific issue? And they talked about it as a group, and they came up with an idea. They're going to cap all expenses on developing this. At this point, if it went beyond, they were going to stop the development of the second office. And when they were done discussing it, they all walked out, and those 200 managers became advocates for cost cutting in the company, and the goals were achieved. Why? Because dialogue solves problems. When everyone feels like they can put their thoughts and feelings into that pool of shared meaning and they're going to be listened to and respected, problems get solved. Things change. The enemy in a conflict is anything that disrupts dialogue. So afterwards, somebody pulled the CEO aside and said, how did you do it? I mean, we could all tell you were about to unload. What stopped you? And here's what she said. She said, I asked myself, what do I want here? She said, and I realized I want them to embrace these cost-cutting measures. And I realized that the biggest barrier was widespread belief that I was being a hypocrite. All of you need to cut costs, but I'm not going to. I'm having a second office built. She said, I knew that I needed to address that if I was going to have what I wanted, that we were all going to work together to cut costs. Isn't that amazing? If you clarify your goals in the middle, boy, talk about hard. Can you imagine how hard that was to do? Because here's what happens. Neuroscience is such a fascinating field. We can put monitors on your brain and watch what happens when you go through difficult things. So we know that what happens in those moments when her finger was coming up is that the emotional side of her brain was on fire. Her body was literally shifting blood flow from her brain to her hands and feet for fight or flight. But neuroscience tells us that when you ask the question, like something like that, what do I really want in this conflict situation in front of these 200 managers? What do I want? That your body shifts. The blood stops flowing from that emotional center of the brain to the prefrontal cortex, your thinking center. And so you're able to calm down. The question is the key. What do I really want? What do you really want? It will change the way you're acting in that moment. It's so interesting how God made our bodies. Ask the question, what do I really want? So how good are you doing that when you're in a conflict situation? Clarify your goals. So now the next part, I'm just going to have to skim through letters B and C because I want to get on to the rest of this. Beware the fool's choice. Beware the fool's choice. I will give you the blanks, so for those of you who love filling in blanks, I'm giving you them, but I'm going to go through it real quick. The fool's choice is thinking that the only options you really have are silence or violence. And we talked about this last time. They're on the back of your notes, but here's a summary. Silence is where you just stop talking. The only thing I can do with this person in this situation is I just can't talk to them. I just can't talk to them. You ever said that? You've given into the fool's choice. I just can't talk to them. And the other side of it is violence. It's not physical violence, it's verbal violence and all these different things that characterize it. Here's what the real goal is. The fool's choice is I'm going to have to do silence, I'm going to have to do violence. Here's the real goal. How can I be 100% honest and 100% respectful? Is that how you think? Some of you can't imagine being 100% honest in a key relationship in your life because you're not. But that's the actual goal. The fool's choice says I can either be honest or I can be respectful, but I can't be both. No, that's not true. You can be both. Letter C, identify your natural style, which way you naturally go towards silence or violence, because you're going to have to compensate for it. Identify your natural style. Now, here I do want to show you something. Flip your notes over in the back, and you see at the top, there's the definitions of silence and violence. If you go down to where it says the worst, you have a natural style in this, a way that you naturally do this. So here's the worst at it. And you can see the worst alternate between bluntly dumping their ideas into the pool of meaning or saying nothing at all. Either they start with, you're not going to like this, but somebody has to be honest. Ever heard that? Some variation of that, or they just remain silent. A lot of people have no idea how to handle conflict because that's what they do. Those are the worst. Now there's a step up from that, and there are people who are good at conflict resolution. Here's what they do. They're fearful that they could destroy a healthy relationship, so they say some of what's on their mind, but understate the views out of fear of hurting the other person, so they sugarcoat their message. Ever done that? Ever said some of what was in your heart or mind, but not all of it because you were afraid of how they would react to it? Well, you're good at it. But there's another level beyond. They speak the best at this, speak their mind completely. They do it in a way that makes it safe for others to hear what they have to say and to respond to it as well. They are both totally honest and completely respectful. This is one of the reasons why I decided to teach on this subject a year and a half ago for the first time. When I was reading this book and I read that sentence, it blew me away. I highlighted it, underlined it, starred it. I'm like, you can do that? You can learn how to be completely honest and completely respectful in a relationship where you're talking about something crucial? Yeah, you can. It's a skill. For the rest of my life, that's one of the skills I want to develop and be really good at. So, where are you at in those three groups? Good, those worst, good, best. Be honest about where you're actually at. And some of you are, it's not very likely that many would say, yep, I'm in the best category. If you are, we can swap spots, you can finish for me, because I'm not in the best category. But for those of you who aren't in the best category, and you're like, okay, so what do I do to go to the next level? Number 2. Second thing you do now is, it's time to talk now. So you prepared yourself, now it's time to actually say something. You start with the facts. You want to get really good at doing conflict resolution in a way that's constructive, not destructive. You have to always start with the facts. And the word always is really important. It's not just a filler word. Always start with the facts when you're doing conflict resolution. Because the fact is, people make mistakes around us all the time, right? The fact is, you make mistakes, I make mistakes, and many times in America now we point out those mistakes. We put them on little pictures like this, and we say, hey, you had one job. I actually like the second picture better. I think that would be great to give a little kid. You had one job. I don't even know how you do it, but it's great. This next one. You had one job. I've been in thirst before. So. And then we are never letting you name another thing ever. Ever. You had one job. Facts are not controversial. They are not personal. They're just facts. You may not like the facts, but facts are just facts. So here are facts. So this is what you'd start with. You arrived at work 20 minutes later. That's late. Yes, sir. That's just a fact. It's not controversial, personal. It's just a fact. Your profits are down 10% in your department. 4 of your direct reports don't even want to work with you. We've lost 3 major clients in the last month. Those are all just facts. Not personal. You may not like what the facts say, but facts are just facts. You always start with the facts. Here are the facts about why we have to talk about this subject today. The facts have tremendous persuasive power. You can see this in the Bible where there's a situation where Paul, the Apostle Paul, had to confront one of Jesus' 12 original disciples, Peter. There was a problem that was happening as the church really began to grow. You know, Jesus started in Israel with the Jews and brought his message of hope and life to the Jews. And the Jews were to take this message now as they became followers of Jesus to the rest of the world. And so unfortunately, a group of them who became followers of Jesus said, you know what, following Jesus is good, but it's not enough. If you really want to follow Jesus, you got to follow Jesus and become a Jew. You got to be circumcised, you got to obey the Sabbath laws, you got to become, and they were called Judaizers. Make sense? They wanted to make you into a Jew, even as a follower of Jesus. And if you wouldn't comply with their Sabbath laws and their requirements like this, then they were going to shun you in Christian love. It's crazy, isn't it? Welcome, still being done today. So this is what was happening. And Peter, one of Jesus' core disciples, had fallen in with the Judaizers. And he'd started associating with them and believing them, and Paul had to confront him. Crucial conversation. You're confronting one of the 12 disciples of Jesus. And here's how he did it. Look at what he did. It says, when Peter came to Antioch, I had to oppose him to his face, for what he did was very wrong. When he first arrived, okay, here's the fact. When he first arrived, he ate with the Gentile believers. That's just a fact. So Gentiles are not Jews. So he's like, you used to eat with them. But then look what happened. He ate with the Gentile believers who were not circumcised. But afterward, when some friends of James came, Peter, here's the second fact, wouldn't eat with those Gentile Christians anymore. Because there's like, oh, I can't be around them because they aren't living like Jews anymore. So that's going to pollute my Christianity. I can't do that anymore. He used to, now he doesn't. That's just facts. He started the confrontation with, here are the facts. Facts aren't personal. Facts are just facts. When you have to deal with a conflict situation, always start with the facts. By the way, it worked. Peter, at the end of that conflict, was sorry and changed his behavior. So this is the interesting thing. About just over a year ago, a friend of mine who'd heard me teach on this the first time came to me one day and said, I've got to tell you what just happened. They went to work one day. Their boss let them have it in an unfair way. They had a list of things they confronted him about, and my friend was deeply hurt because my friend in part had switched. They had reduced my friend's work hours from 40 hours to 28 hours. So if you're working 12 less hours per week, times 4 in a month, that's 48 hours less of work. But they were still expecting them to work at that upper level. Yeah, very common story, isn't it? Very common. We have managers that do things like that. And so this manager come into my friend and just let him have it. You're taking advantage of the company. All these awful accusations. And my friend was deeply hurt. Thankfully, my friend had the ability in the moment not to say anything. Didn't say anything, just remained calm. And then came to meet with me and said, I want to go back and I want to have a crucial conversation with my manager about what they just did. And so they had written up something and it was all, let me tell you what you are. It's like, no. Let's just start with the facts. And so through like 3 or 4 major revisions, they whittled it down to just the facts. The fact is I worked 12 hours less per week. The fact is this thing you accused me of doing, I didn't do. The fact is the thing that you told me I have to do isn't my job responsibility. It's this other person's job responsibility. These are the facts. Laid out all the facts. Then told the story, which we'll get to in a minute, and then went back to meet with the manager. And they had a great conversation. And the manager was sorry. And they had a better working relationship. That's what's possible. You always start with the facts. If you don't know what the facts are and you haven't written them out, you're not ready to say anything yet. Always start with the facts. Then, number 3, third thing you do after that is now you tell your story. People screw this up. If you reverse these two, you're going to have a lot of conflict. You don't reverse these two. You don't start with your story and tell the facts. You always start with the facts, then you tell your story. For those of you who don't know what tell your story means, we talked about this last time, so let me give you a summary because this is so important. Matter of fact, we got an upcoming message where we're going to talk more about this and how it impacts our faith. But let me show you the chart. So this is what happens every day in your life. Every day in your life, you see or hear something. Somebody does something, you see it, you hear about it. Then you tell a story based on what you've seen. So the facts, and you tell a story. The story may be nice. Oh, they really care about me. What a thoughtful thing for them to do. Or you tell a not nice story. Oh my goodness, they're out to get me. They really don't like me. They're going to stab me in the back every chance they get. Okay, so we tell stories. Your brain is a storytelling machine. You're not sitting down saying, I wonder what story I should tell. Your brain just tells a story. You're not aware that your brain is telling you a story unless you pay attention to your emotions, because the stories you tell create emotions and they determine how you act. This happens every day of your life. We're storytelling machines. We see and hear things, we tell stories. Stories affect how we feel. Those feelings. So here's how this affects a conflict situation. What we often do is we jump right to the story with the person we're mad at. You're out to get it. Let's say that you work for a boss that is really controlling. You ever have a boss that was really controlling? I know this is hypothetical. Well, let's say that you had a boss once who was a micromanager, watched everything you did, and they just always nagging. You never felt like they trusted you. So what we would typically do in America is we go into our office one day when we have reached the peak, right? One time too far, and we blow up and we say, you just micromanage everything. You are such a bad manager. We'd let them have it, right? It's a common tale in America. And how does that go? Do they go, oh, well, thank you for that input. I really appreciate that. No, of course not. Safety is violated. So they're going to react. And now you got the death spiral. Because we started with the story. Don't start with the story, start with the facts. Hey, can I sit down and talk with you about something? I got a question. I just have to ask you. You know, you've asked me to report to you twice a day, but none of the other direct reports report to you twice a day. On top of that, you've asked me to run every single idea I have for this account by you before implementing, but nobody else does. Facts, two of them, right? So the story I'm telling myself is, you don't really trust me. Am I looking at that the right way? Now, is that a little better? Do you think the boss has a possibility of listening to you if you do it that way? Yeah, the possibility of actual dialogue goes way up when you start with the facts and then you tell the story rather than telling the story first. You hear the difference? Really significant. Now, I am going to remember to say this because I told you at the beginning I might not remember to say this. I'm going to say, this is so hard. This is not easy. It's not easy to tell your story. Let me show you an example from the Bible. The Bible is filled with examples of that formula. Seeing and hearing something, telling a story, acting, feeling and acting. So in the book of Genesis, it tells a story of how God chose Abraham and his wife Sarah to start a nation. The nation of Israel. And so it's a lot about the faith of Abraham as he wrestles with what God wants him to do. And not everything that Abraham did was right. One time, Abraham and his wife Sarah were traveling, and they went to this place that was kind of a rough area. And the reputation for this area was that the king would take any woman he wanted. And if you were married to him, and you're dead, so he can take him. And so he was afraid. And so he got into this area with his wife, Sarah, and apparently she was a hottie. We don't have pictures, but apparently she was a hottie, because here's what happened. Because Abraham said to his wife, oh my goodness, the king's going to kill me, because look at you. He's going to want you. He's going to kill me. And what? You know, so there are the facts. It's a godless area. You tell a story. I'm about to die. How do you think you're going to feel? That going to make you feel anyway? Yeah, you're going to feel scared, right? So what do? They decide together to lie to everybody in this area. Let's tell everybody that we're brother and sister. And so they tell a lie. The lie was rooted in how they felt, which is rooted in the story they told themselves. All of this is connected constantly in your life. So they get in there and the king says, whoa, who is this hottie in front of me? And he says, well, it's my sister. And so he's like, you're mine. Takes her into the palace, doesn't sleep with her. Thank God. So, but that night, God appears to the king in a dream and says, you are dead. Because you've taken another man's wife. I'm going to kill you and pretty much everybody around you. And the king's in the dream's like, I didn't know. He said, sister, I didn't know. This isn't fair. And so the king wakes up, he gets his advisors together. Oh my goodness, God just said this to me. Can you believe this? They call Abraham in and said, what have you done? And Abraham has to tell the story. He says, well, I thought, this is a godless place. They'll want my wife and will kill me to get her. So there's the story, right? The fact was, it was a godless place. The story, they're going to kill me to take my wife. That's why I lied to you. All of this ties together. Do you see how this ties together? All this ties together. Now, here's why I'm telling you this. In healthy relationships, or any relationship that you want to be really, really close to, you need to understand you have got to get to the point where you don't just share facts, but you tell your story. Now, why didn't Abraham tell the story? Until God made him. Because that story isn't very nice to tell, is it? Right? So here's why we avoid this part of the crucial conversation like the plague. Sometimes the stories you want to tell about the other person aren't very flattering. So your behavior is rooted in the stories you told, and you don't like the stories you told, and you know if you tell them what's spinning in your head, they're going to be offended and hurt, and so we back off. But in order to have great relationships, you don't stop with the facts. You use the facts as the basis to say, and so here's the story I was telling in my head. And if you've done the facts right, the story will make sense even if they don't feel that way. Now, the risk is still there. The story you told about them may be so unflattering, they may get hurt. And then what you're doing is what we talked about last time. You watch for signs that they're getting hurt. The two signs that they're getting hurt are silence and violence. They go like this. Or they go like this. You're watching for those two signs. And if they go either way, you know, oh my goodness, they're not going to listen. Safety's been violated. We're not going to have dialogue when safety's violated. You step out of the issue like we talked about last time. You make it safe to talk again because the reason they've done this, they go to silence or violence when they feel disrespected. Oh my goodness, you're just trying to treat me disrespectfully, or they fear that you're about to harm them. And that's why they go to silence or violence. So you step out, you make it safe again, and then you talk. So how courageous are you when it comes to telling your story? Some of you know it's like, oh man, I don't tell my story. In healthy relationships, and you want to have them really healthy, you've got to learn how to do these pieces together. You start with the facts. You get yourself ready. Then you start with the facts, you tell your story, and then maybe the most important part of them all, number 4, you ask for their input. You ask for their input. In case you haven't caught this yet, it takes 2 things to do this really, really well. It takes courage, right? Because it takes courage to sit down with somebody, your boss, your coworkers, your spouse, your kids, your mom and dad, your in-laws, your neighbors. It takes courage to have the crucial conversation, to say, here are the facts, and here's the story I'm telling you. It takes a lot of courage to do that. But there's another thing that is essential for a crucial conversation to work. It is essential that you demonstrate genuine humility. Genuine humility. And you demonstrate humility by asking for their input. You demonstrate humility by asking for their input. Because it takes humility to sincerely to say to somebody, hey, here's what happened, and here's the story I'm telling about it. Am I looking at this the right way? Is that how you look at it? What's your perspective on this? That takes genuine humility to do. Now, here's why this is significant. Again, look what the Bible says about this. Fools, what do they think? Well, they think their own way is always right. But the wise listen to others. If you do the facts and you tell the story and you don't want to listen to their response, you are not ready to learn. And the way you listen to their response is by asking the question, asking for their input. Am I looking at this the right way? How do you look at this? What's your perspective on this? And you sincerely want to hear it. It's not just a formula that you've memorized. You sincerely want to know how they're looking at it. See, here's what, if I were tweaking this a little bit to match our message today, I would tweak it this way. Fools think their own stories are always right. But the wise, they listen. And there are a lot of people in America who think that every story in their head is always right. And so they come into conflict situations already convinced that their stories are right. And so they load up and they come in, it's like, you are this way. You do this, this, this. And then all of a sudden in the conversation, something comes out that they had no idea. And they're like, oh, I guess I was wrong. Oh, sorry for talking, bye. And all of a sudden there's this huge mess to clean up. Because fools think their own stories are always right. Studies say that we are wrong about 50% of the time. And I totally made that statistic up, which shows how wrong I am. So I have no idea how much we're wrong. We're wrong a lot. We're wrong all the time. And your stories are wrong constantly. Constantly wrong. That's why you better internalize that truth and not be the fool who thinks your story is always right. but show genuine humility by willingness to ask for their input. How do you look at this? What do you think about what I'm saying? And really listen. That's humility. And when you bring these elements into a conflict situation, that's when all the cool things can happen. So let me give you an example from the book that is just amazing. Talk about playing with dynamite. A guy came home from work one day and he walked in and he could see his wife was visibly upset. He said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "No, I'm not. I was doing your laundry and I found this receipt for $48 to a motel down the road." And he said, "Boy, that's weird." He said, I don't know where that came from. He said, "I'll check into it when I have a chance." And she said, "I'd feel better if we kind of checked into it right now." And he said, "Really? It's $48. Not that big a deal." And she said, "It's not the money that has me worried." And he said, "You're worried?" She said, "It's a motel, a cheap motel down the street." Now, what story is she telling? You all know. You all know the story in her mind, right? She has a fact, a cheap motel for $48, a receipt. And so she made up a story. Thankfully, they'd been trained in this. She knew how to do it the right way. She said, "You know that my sister found out that her husband was having an affair this way. She found a suspicious receipt, and then she said, 'I don't have anything to worry about, do I? What do you think is going on with the bill?' Genuine humility, she asked for his input. She didn't assume, right? That's what we tend to do. My story's true. You are a jerk. Because we've assumed the story in our head is true. She didn't assume. What do you think is going on? And he's like, "I don't know, but you don't have anything to worry about with me." And she said, "You've never given me any reason to question you. And I don't really believe you're having an affair. It just would help me put my mind to rest if we were to check on this right now. Would that bother you?" And he's like, "Not at all." So he picked up the phone and gave him a call. Well, it turns out that the owner of that hotel also owned a Chinese restaurant that they had both eaten at the week before. And he had used the same credit card machine at both places. And so he gets off the phone, tells her this. She's like, "Oh, whew, thanks so much." And instead of, talk about dynamite. Just think if she would have come in like we typically do. Found the fact, found the receipt, told the wrong story, and attacked. How much damage would have been done in that relationship? But instead, it was diffused with very little emotion because this really works. Start with the facts, tell your story, ask for their input genuinely. Don't assume your story's right. Don't assume it's right. One of the best quotes from the book, and I'll finish with this, is the author said, "At the heart of almost all chronic problems in our organization, our teams, and our families, at the heart of almost all chronic problems, lie crucial conversations, ones that we are either not holding or not holding well." You want to know what's going wrong in your family? Want to know what's going wrong in your work? Want to know what's going wrong in your church relationships? Anywhere you want to look. This is the underlying culprit. You're avoiding problems, or you've tried it and you've done it wrong and it hurt the relationship, it didn't help it. This is what's messing us up. This is messing up our society, why we can't even have a civil conversation about any controversial topic in America, right? We have no idea how to do this. But it's not just affecting our nation, it's affecting us. And some of you sitting here today know that you have to have a crucial conversation with someone, and you've avoided it. Some of you have been avoiding it for years. It's been a long time, so here's what you do. You get yourself ready. You sit down and say, what are my goals? What do I really want for this other person and me? Think it through from both of their perspectives, yours and theirs. Then lay out the facts. Well, here are the fact. How many you have? Maybe only one, maybe 6. Who knows how many facts you have? Put them down. Then what's the story you're telling? Think this all through. Then schedule a meeting with them. And sit down and say, I just want to talk to you about something. And you say it with gentleness. Humility is gentle because you know you could be wrong. And say, I need to talk to you about something. I really care about this relationship. That's your goal. I want to have a better relationship with you. So here's what I've been through. Here's what I've seen. Here's what I've heard. And so the story I'm telling myself is this. Am I looking at this the right way? Is there a different way I should be looking at this? What's your perspective on it? And dialogue can take place, and the problem can get solved. And that's why we put this on YouTube, so that you can watch this again and again and again, like I need to, until we start to not just know these things, but do these things. That's why this is so important. Now, for us in our faith, when Jesus came, he started with the facts. When Jesus came to her 2,000 years ago, he started with the facts. He said, hey, you want to know the facts? I'm sorry, the facts aren't all that well, but they're not pleasant to hear. The fact is, God is pure and holy and perfect. And the fact is, if you want to be with this perfect Father in heaven, you have to be perfect too. And the fact is, none of you are perfect. Not even close. And so Jesus came to tell a new story. Rather than just living with this separation, he came to say, you want to know how much this Father in heaven loves you? He sent me. He sent me to personally carry your sins in my body on the cross. Because you are that important to him. And Jesus died for us to tell a new story. A story of God's unfailing, undying love for us. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish today. If you will let Jesus Christ, he will give you the most amazing gift of forgiveness based on the facts and the story that he told with his life. Our God loves you enough to send his only Son to die for all of us. So maybe it's time to just acknowledge the truth of these facts to God, to say something like this in your heart to God. Say, God, I know the fact is I've done a lot of things wrong in my life. And if the only way to be with a perfect God is to be perfect, then I have no shot at that. But Jesus, I heard that you died on the cross for my sins. So I'm asking you to forgive me. I want you to take over in my life today. And I'm going to offer myself to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, I want to let you know, there was something so cool that happened as I was prepping this message. I mean, I love this content, but as I was prepping this week, there was a part of this that struck me so hard that relates to our faith that I'm going to interrupt the series that we're in next time I speak, to show you how what we just talked about today doesn't just impact our earthly relationships, but it is essential for your relationship with God. I rarely, once in a while, in all the years I've been teaching, once in a while, this happens to me, where I just sit down and I write an entire message cold turkey without any prep, and this one's almost ready for 2 weeks from now. I cannot wait to show you how what we just talked about today impacts your relationship with God. So if you can make it back in 2 weeks, I'm super excited about what we're going to talk about. And in the meantime, go practice this with people that you really are struggling with. So have a good week. See you in a couple weeks.